Thanks, Megan, for the invitation and the opportunity to be here and talk about some of the work we've been doing at Imagine Canada. I got to say, I didn't expect to be quite as intimidated as this following that terrific film, which I must say I really enjoyed seeing. It's a bit of a homecoming for me in a way. I lived in Calgary for a year or so in the 1990s, and I must say I have really fond memories of the city. To me, it was a great place to live. It's a place I found really energetic, down to earth, and I must say, being up a little bit early this morning because of the time change, I was impressed once again with how early the city gets going. I've often spoken to friends about how attractive I found to live here, and I think that film captures very well a lot of that, the spirit of the community, the great place it is for families, the great place it is for young children especially. My kids, I found, could take advantage of a wonderful array of cultural, recreational, and educational activities. They really enjoyed living here. Although now they've gone off to university, I don't think they remember much of it. I think you're going to find this talk quite a change of pace. With the video, we've seen people working at very much the community level, making a difference in the lives of individuals. This is going to be more of a view from the mountaintops. I want to share some of the ideas that we at Imagine have been working on. And a lot of this comes from applying a background in the federal public service as someone who has formal training in economics, but spent the bulk of my working life dealing with public policy issues in a government setting. So this is going to be very much, I would say, a mountaintops as opposed to a street level view. But it's a mountaintops view that I think is useful to charities particularly in developing their relationships with government, the business community, and with donors. And my theme today is going to be reframing. And in the importance of making progress by changing our way of thinking about things. And it's a topic that I'm going to develop building on ideas that I've come across in the variety of jobs I had in the federal public service. And I want to start by talking about something a little bit outside the box, something I don't think is on many people's minds right at the moment, and that is floor covering. Carpets had a powerful effect on my thinking when I was Commissioner of Sustainable Environment and Sustainable Development for the federal government. In that job, I had the opportunity to learn about a carpet company called Interface in Atlanta, Georgia. In 1994, Ray Anderson, the CEO of Interface, experienced what he called a sudden and profound realization regarding what the petrochemical and waste-intensive carpet business was doing to the planet. He called it a spear to the chest, and he became committed to change. Interface, as a result, revised its mission, vision, and values, business model, and production methods, aspiring to be the first sustainable industrial enterprise. And some of the changes strike one as being startlingly simple. For example, changing the business model from selling carpet to leasing carpet, so that the carpet always remains the responsibility of Interface throughout its life cycle, so that worn-out carpet becomes raw material for new product. But of course, other changes required much more investment and innovation and new technology. But the results of this new thinking have been quite striking. The company has grown to be the world's largest carpet manufacturer. Its environmental footprint has been dramatically reduced, and it is ranked by Fortune magazine as one of the top 100 companies in the US and one of the top 100 employers. It has no trouble attracting dynamic and qualified staff to work in a company that's making a difference. And all this stems from someone who sat down one day and changed his thinking from regarding the natural environment as a source, as a cost of doing business, to thinking about sustainability as an overriding benefit to the company and to the world. Reframing was the key. In a similar way, I think we need to reframe our view of charities. I believe that today we think of charities in a way that is both factually wrong and unhelpful for the Canada we want and for the economy on which we depend for jobs and prosperity and quality of life. I think Canada's economic success requires all of us, business, government, and charities, to think and act in a different way, more economic and more strategic, if Canada is to remain a successful country in the 21st century. Before I joined Imagine Canada, I don't recall thinking of charities a great deal. Perhaps when someone knocked at my door looking for support for a good cause, or during the annual workplace charitable campaign, or seeing public service ads on television. Perhaps most people have the same attitude as I did, that charities are simply a group of good people, largely volunteers, doing good things, somehow existing apart from what we think of as the productive economy. But I've found, working with Imagine, that charities are much, much more than that. Charities are an important part of Canada's economy and affect us all in direct and indirect ways. Charities are simply a big part of the economy, and in the economy, bigness counts. They account for 14% of employment, some 2 million Canadians, almost as many Canadians as work in manufacturing, and more than in construction, for example. More than this, charities generate economic activity, around 8% of gross national income. So if you're talking about jobs and growth, charities are one of the places for governments and others to look. In addition, and this actually surprised me quite a bit, over the last decade, charities have grown more quickly than economies as a whole in most developed countries. And in part, I think this has occurred because charities are service-oriented, and services are growing faster than goods production in advanced economies. But it's also, I think this is a key point, because charities are focused in areas where there's a growing need and demand amongst citizens. They're focused in health and culture and recreation and social services, to name just a few. As economies become richer, as our population becomes older and more diverse, and as the pace of change accelerates, these are areas in which demand for service will continue to grow. This means that charities are much more than good people doing good things in an informal way, and it's important to convey this message. They are an important driver of jobs and income. They are growing more quickly than the economy as a whole, and this growth is driven by value. Charities provide the services and opportunities that Canadians increasingly want and need. They are an important part of that fundamental and elusive element, the quality of life. We can expect, I think, that demand for what charities provide will continue to grow more quickly than the economy as a whole. The problem is, it's much less clear that sources of funding will grow in the same way. Looking forward, it is likely that fundamental forces at work will alter the financial picture of charities, and I think will alter the way charities do business and drive important changes in relationships with government, donors, and the business community. A year ago, I think I assumed that most charities got their money from donations, the Canvas at the Door and the workplace campaign that I mentioned. But this is only one part of a larger and much more diverse picture. if you look at all charities, including universities and hospitals, government transfers account for over 50% of income, with provincial governments being the most important. Sales of goods and services, I should have said that's about 50%. Sales of goods and services, earned income by charities, accounts for about 30%. Donations from individuals, the people at the front door and so on, 7%. And various other sources, investment income, corporate donations, the rest. Corporate philanthropy, interestingly enough, accounted for a relatively small proportion, about 1%. But it's looking forward, I think, that the picture becomes a bit cloudy and worrying. Let's look at the biggest source of funds for the charitable sector, government. The outlook for government funding is really highly uncertain. Most governments in Canada, particularly the government of the province I live in, are facing severe fiscal pressure and an overriding objective of reducing deficits. Others are committed to reducing the role in the economy to a smaller government. This means that it seems unlikely the availability of government funding, absolutely the biggest source of income for the sector, will grow as fast as the economy as a whole. And this uncertainty is occurring just at the point where charities are being expected to do more because governments are increasingly doing less under fiscal pressure. The outlook for donations from individuals is also quite cloudy. The number of taxpayers who donate as a percentage of the tax-paying population is declining. Relatively well-off donors who contribute most are becoming more and more important, and they are aging. And they are not being replaced by the recruitment to the sector of younger donors. Overall, the percentage of national income donated to charity in Canada, historically fairly stable around 1/2% of GNP, is showing signs of decline, of softness. So that the overall emerging picture, if you go forward, is quite worrying. With the demand for the sector's services likely to grow more quickly than the economy, and funding likely to grow at most as quickly as the economy, if we're lucky, you project a gap. Of course, after the fact, there will be no gap because charities will only be able to do as much as their donations and other sources of income will allow them to do. So the fact of the matter becomes that it is understandable that financing is the overriding issue in the charitable sector. Now, charities, I think, will be working hard to maintain and increase existing sources of funding, and that's why Imagine Canada has been very active in promoting a stretch tax credit for donors. This would induce new donors to donate, induce new donors to become active in the world of charity, and existing donors to donate more. It's a proposal that would both produce funds now and provide an incentive for new donors to be recruited into the donors we need for the future. But you're looking forward that donors, as I said, count for 7%. This is not going to be enough. Charities will have to look for other improvements in other sources of income. I think that they will look more for earned income from sales and services and membership. But these activities are, at the moment, are constrained by legislation such as the Income Tax Act and the Canada Corporations Act. I think it also means that charities will increasingly be looking at new partnerships and innovative sources of funding. And I think that points to a much greater relationship, a much greater emphasis by charities on the relationship with the private sector. That means either through corporate philanthropy or for the expansion of corporate social responsibility programs or other forms of partnerships. And in that I include the idea of social impact investment, the topic of a recent major G8 report. And I think that would be an important component of a fuller relationship with the business and financial community. I've argued that charities are sources of jobs and growth and provide high-value services that directly meet the needs of Canada. They're an important and productive sector of the economy. But there is value the charitable sector contributes which goes beyond this, which is, I think, somewhat harder to articulate, but really important. A vibrant charitable sector, to me, is a strategic advantage in the highly competitive and integrated global economy. And I think cities provide a vivid illustration of this. Why do some cities, and by implication countries, grow faster and better than others? Well, there's a fair amount of literature on this, particularly from the US. The Milken Institute, for example, recently published a study ranking the performance of American cities along with an analysis of what made them successful. The key factors identified by Milken were talent, human capital. The index related good performance of a city most strongly to the share of college graduates in the labor force and the share of the labor force made up of knowledge, professional, and creative occupations. Of these, scientific and technology workers scored as most important, followed by management and business professionals, the arts, culture, and media. I reread the articles several times looking for a mention of the contribution of the civil service, but I was eventually frustrated. When you look at Calgary and you look at the video, on the one hand, we know that Calgary is a city driven by resources. And the positive impact of the gifts of nature are apparent in the Milken results too. That simply cannot be ignored. Cities in resource-rich areas perform quite well. But Milken puts these results in context by arguing, I think, that the real question is not resources versus other influences, but the combination of resources and talent. It's not resources or talent, it's a combination of both. The strength of economies like Calgary comes from the ability to combine resources and ideas, the ability to combine resource endowments with technology to sustain prosperity, both in the resource sector and in the more general economy. And I see watching TV in Ontario, the commercials about the tar sands, the oil sands, really emphasizing the impact of the oil sands development on innovation, on the development of new means for controlling environmental impact and so on, that the spillovers, the benefit for the entire economy is increasingly a part of that broader equation. Now, Richard Ford has remarked, when all is said and done, ideas, talent, and skills remain the key factor in the growth of cities. And what attracts skilled, educated, talented, and mobile young people to locate in your city or your country? I think clearly the economy is, the quality of life is an extremely important factor. And you look at the video and the quality of life, the vibrancy of the communities is one of the things that really attracts people to be members of your community and make a contribution here. Calgary Economic Development put this well in the material that Megan circulated for the chat here, and that is that the younger generation chooses its city first and the job second. Now, more than ever before, this puts pressure on cities to compete on the basis of quality of life. Global cities are competing to retain their most creative residents and attract talented newcomers. So I guess the way I've been thinking about it, and I think this is the reality, is today's world is one in which skill and talent and ingenuity really, really matter. And those same factors are very highly mobile. Someone can do the same job with a computer and a brain in Ottawa or Singapore or Calgary or Mumbai. So what will lead these talented resources to make Canada or Calgary their home? I think that a really important factor is the charitable sector. It provides many of the key components of quality of life, education, medical services, arts, culture, recreation, social services. But more than this, I think, again, really apparent from the video, The charitable sector provides people with a community in which to live and to participate, to volunteer and donate, to make a difference in the community, the country, and the world around them. As one critic put it, charities provide people with the opportunity to be fully human, to participate in imagining what Canada can be. To me, Canadians want a country that is economically successful, environmentally responsible, and socially aware. In short, a country with a good economy and a high and improving quality of life. We start with huge advantages in achieving this. Our resource wealth is an obvious example, but the factor which will become more and more important is the skill, talent, ingenuity of the population. And these people will be attracted by the high quality of life and the strong charitable sector upon which the quality of life depends. So let me sum up. Charities are an essential part of the economy, a big employer, a source of high-value services and growth. In addition, they provide an important, if intangible, strategic value to Canada in a highly competitive world economy. 19th century thinking about good people doing good things, somehow outside our concerns about economic performance and social progress, are simply not good enough for thinking about charities and government and business in the 21st century in Canada. It's time to change the way we think, to reframe our view of the charitable sector. Paraphrasing a quote from Einstein, we cannot effectively address issues of the future with the same thinking we used to create them. I think the example of interface that I began with, the carpet manufacturer, shows that changing the way we think leads to changes in the way we act and the way we make hundreds of decisions in our personal and working lives. I think this is why it's so important to communicate this productive and creative view of charities to government, because each day in government life, people are taking decisions that are going to affect the future of the charitable sector. And it's important that in doing that, in doing those little or big decisions, that they have the right view of the world. So I feel that rethinking is a fundamental step in making charities the vibrant force that they can be, helping Canada to continue to be a successful country in the 21st century. And the role for Imagine Canada and me and all this, I have another favorite philosopher, and that is Miss Manners, the etiquette columnist of the New York Times. Asked how she managed to raise such perfect children, Miss Manners replied, "A generation of constant nagging." Well, I think in the communications business, where I'm not an expert, I must say, nagging is kind of a negative term. The public service equivalent we always used to use was staying on message. And for Canada's charities, our job will be to stay on message consistently and persistently, year after year, emphasizing the benefits of the charitable sector to the economy as a whole and the benefits of thinking about us in the right way. Thank you very much.